So I'm a little bit torn having these mornings together with you, Trudy, to teach. There's a part of me that would just like us to sit quietly, listen to the wind and the sails of our great sailboat here and so forth. But on the other hand, I think, well, you can sit quietly at home, and there are some things to talk about and teach, so some mixture of these two, I think. I have a question first. How many of you are relatively new to mindfulness meditation? A handful of virgins, even in Hawaii, imagine. The rest of you are all very experienced, I see. Okay, thank you. Well, I want to talk about mindfulness this morning, which I think can be a kind of boring word. I'm not sure it's even a very good translation. But it's a beautiful, beautiful quality, because it is this human capacity to wake up wherever we are. And mindfulness is being used all over, as you know. It's sort of the new popular thing in education and business and mindful stress reduction and healthcare and all kinds of things like that. But it's much more than stress reduction, although that's a good thing. It's really a form of love. Mindfulness means to bring a presence and awareness and love to what is happening. And Ramdas's translation, which Trudy and I have been using it for a while now, is loving awareness. Yeah. And it's based on, or it's built on, trust that we actually can be aware, and we can dare to be fully present for our life and to see it clearly. Mindfulness also, it's said that to become enlightened, one great Zen master said, is to become intimate with the world. And so mindfulness actually allows us to be intimate with one another, intimate with the changing of the seasons, intimate with the circumstances of our society and planet, and intimate with mystery. Now, one dimension of mindfulness that's not talked about much, people kind of think of it as passive. You sit and you focus on your navel or whatever. It's a compound word, sati sampajanya, and one part means being present, intimate, awake to mystery, and the second part means a mindful response. But before we can respond wisely, we actually have to see with clarity and regulate ourselves in some way so that we're not just in our habits and our reactions. And it brings a sense of trust as one cultivates and develops it. So here's a story. During my first year of teaching, a girl named Shay was assigned to my 7th grade class. She was a desperately unhappy child. We don't even need to know what's happening at home. And rebelled against the most basic rules, such as stay in your seat or raise your hand to speak. Shay and I battled for control of the classroom, and I tried every technique I knew. Behavior contracts, praise, reprimands, none of them worked. I even called Shay's home every week, but no one answered. She lived with an older sister. Her mother had simply left. I went to the school counselor, who said I'd done my duty and offered to transfer Shay to another classroom. I declined. Shay was my student, and I wasn't going to pass her off to someone else. In the faculty lounge, the older teachers patted me on the back. Thankfully, they didn't have Shay in their classrooms. June finally came. On the last day of school, Shay was quick to head out the door. As I sat contemplating my failure with her, she walked back in. Oh great, I thought, one last act of terrorism. In Shay's hand was a small bowl, the kind that students make in ceramics class. She thrust it into my grasp. Here, she said, it's the only thing I could think of to give you. I turned the bowl over and saw Shay's initials etched on the bottom. Thanks for trying to like me, she said. Before I could speak, she turned and left. After several more years teaching, I went on to become a school principal, and now I'm a district superintendent, and Shay's bowl has never left my desk. So there's a lot in this story about trust and mindfulness. Trust that you can tolerate difficulty. Trust that you can see with the heart, that you can see a bigger picture. Trust to look and see, who are we really? To turn, what Martin Luther King says, to turn the fatigue of despair into the buoyancy of hope. So there are 3 levels to mindfulness that I want to talk about, work with this morning. The first is that mindfulness allows us to be present for the content of our experience. It means that we can sit and feel our body breathing. And for most people, being aware of the breath becomes a kind of gateway, a refuge to presence, to feel your breath. And the point isn't to become a good breather. Sometimes it's short or long or deep or shallow. Oh, I need the right breath. It's simply to feel how the body breathes itself and become in rhythm with the breath and with the air that dusts the tops of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa and comes into your lungs. It also dusts the Fukushima nuclear reactor, in case you hadn't noticed, and everything else in the globe, and we share this. You start to feel the interbeing of things. And as you become present, because okay? All right? As you become present, because the breath is more than anything an invitation to presence, then you become aware of all the waves and experiences that rise and fall around the breath. And you expand what the neuroscientists call your window of tolerance. So you sit and your loneliness comes. And usually when you're bored or lonely because you can't deal with it, what do? Open the refrigerator, right? Or go online or whatever it is. But instead, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, you keep your loneliness warm. You hold it with you and say, oh, this is lonely, this is what loneliness is like. Or your fear, or your grief, or your desire. People think spiritual practice means you should get rid of desire, but my poet friend Alison Luderman says, it's kind of like you're on a diet and you hide the chocolate chip cookies so you won't eat them. Meanwhile, you're the only person in the entire galaxy that knows where those chocolate chip cookies are hidden. You don't get rid of desire, but you come to an understanding of it so that you're not caught in it. Oh, this is desire. This is pain in the body. And you find ways both to acknowledge it, soften to it. And little by little, your capacity to be present grows. A woman whose mother had Alzheimer's decided to have her come live in the apartment. Her name was Jillian. And she went off to work. She worked in the publishing industry and had a wonderful collection of books and so forth. She came back home into the living room one day to find her beloved books scattered across the floor. Her mother announced, I'm tired of all these old dusty books. I'm going to give them to my dentist. She was momentarily trapped by her anger. How could you let this happen? She scolded her mother's attendant. The attendant, who wasn't caught in the drama, replied, Madam, today I pack the books up, and tomorrow I will unpack them. If this gives a sense of control to a woman who's lost so much, well then it's fine with me. It doesn't matter so much. I just like being with her. And you hear in this story how we have our ideas about how people should behave. Generally, they don't follow your program. You might have noticed that. And how the world should behave. But mindfulness becomes an invitation to the heart to say, yes, this is the way that it is. Before we respond, before we find a wise response that takes care of the things in the world, first, we just have to stop and pause and take a breath and say, oh yeah, here we are with loving awareness. Whether it's grief or loneliness, or for some people it's joy. Some of you, I'm sorry to say, are rather loyal to your suffering. And when the joy or bliss, there was that beautiful rainbow kind of walking around, like what should I get for breakfast? And I gotta make that call, whatever. when the joy comes, it's sometimes so unfamiliar to us, or it doesn't fit our sense of ourself. So to become mindful allows us somehow to not be afraid of the experiences of life. And you think it's a personal thing, and it is. I mean, we lend it to one another when our friends are freaked out, and we say, it's okay. Because you have the trust, they borrow trust from you. But it's also political. This is James Baldwin who writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate and ignorance so stubbornly is because they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. And here in this culture, because we can't bear our grief or the insecurity, the world is changing, jobs are being lost, they're being created here, people are dying, they're being born there, there is still warfare and mistreatment of people and injustice, and you know, we want to blame it on somebody else, that the world is, there's something wrong with it, and so we blame it on the communists, or the Muslims, or the immigrants, or the Mexicans, or the blacks, or the gays, or whatever. We project it out because we can't bear the fact of our human lot, which is insecurity. Until we find what my teacher Ajahn Chah called the wisdom of insecurity, where people would ask him questions about things, oh great master, tell us what's true. And he would smile to most of those questions and say, it's uncertain, isn't it? And it was so frustrating. You well, tell me about enlightenment. It's uncertain, isn't it? But you're supposed to be enlightened. Tell me how I should practice. It's uncertain, isn't it? You know, you have to find your own way, like through Braille. But there's a way in which our ability to be present for this mysterious joy and sorrow of human incarnation and not project it on somebody else means that we can carry a wisdom in the world that so deeply needs it. So this is the first part of mindfulness. It allows you to be present for yourself and for life. And if you close your eyes for just a moment, and let me ask you a quick reflection, what is it that's asking for your welcome in your heart, in your body, that's been cast out, that you're asked to receive with loving awareness? And with mindfulness practice, you can name it gently. Oh, the sadness I haven't had time to grieve, because the unfinished business of the heart may come up as you sit. Or maybe it's longing, or maybe it's unexpressed love, or creativity, or something in your body. And as you name it gently inside, oh, sadness, longing, love, now add compassion. Hold it all, whatever that is, with tenderness. And now, invite it to open and get bigger. If it's grief or loneliness or joy or love or longing, say, okay, show me. Let me be present. Let me bear witness to you with a loving heart. And the beautiful gift is that mindfulness is trustworthy, that loving awareness can hold everything, no matter what it is. I can't do this. I can't even find anything to be aware of. What's he talking about? And then you become lovingly aware of, oh, doubt. This is the doubting mind. And I'm no good at this. Oh, that's the judging mind. Thank you for your opinion. And awareness can hold it all. So this is the first gift of mindfulness, the trust that you have the capacity to be present for the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. An enormous gift. Then, the second gift of mindfulness and trust is not the capacity to be able to tolerate human existence with its joys and sorrows, of the content of experience. But you start to become aware of the process of experience. And this shifts your whole sense of who you think you are. I went to a middle school to teach, and then I got this letter from a student a couple of months later. Dear Jack Kornfield, you came to meet with our class at your center and taught us meditation. At the time I didn't think it mattered much. I just wanted to be with my friends. Now my mom and I are having some really bad fights and stuff, and I don't know what to do. I go out on the roof and sit, and I don't know why, but I remember back to what you taught us, and a little bit of meditation I learned, and it helps me not be so mad and upset. I can even talk to her sometimes afterward. We should learn this in school. And so what starts to happen is not only can you show up for the presence of your experience, but you also begin to see that whatever your experience is, it's not the end of the story. The Buddha in the text says, walking along the Ganges, can you see the bubbles that float along the Ganges? And you examine them closely, and they're empty and transparent, and they don't contain anything. Look into your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own sensations. They arise for a time. They seem permanent, really. You take them to be who you are, and yet, like the bubbles on the Ganges, they disappear. And so this, you start to become aware of the shift from the content to the process of experience itself. And all things are impermanent. As Zen Master Suzuki Roshi says, when you realize the fact of impermanence and find your composure in it, there you find yourself in enlightenment or liberation. So you start to see not only can you be present for experience, but you also can trust that what happens is not the end of the story, and you don't take it so personally. Dina Metzger, poet, writes, give me everything mangled and bruised, and I will make a light of it to make you weep, and we will have rain, and we will begin again. And I know sitting with people going through the deepest grief and the loss of a child and the great traumas, and it's not an easy thing to work through trauma because it's held in the body, and the stories may never have been told. Sitting with vets, combat vets who come back who will say, I can't tell you what I saw. You know, no one wants to hear the horrors of war. But then they say something much more terrible. They say, I can't tell you what I had to do. And that's the real weight on the soul. But to be in a room of combat vets and make a field of mindfulness where you can tell the story that you've never told anyone and have people look at you and say, yes, you're a human being, you were a warrior, and now you are not a warrior. You are back in the peaceful world. You did what you had to do. We hear your story and we hear your pain. And we welcome you home. And it's one of the most healing things that can happen. Because it's not the end of the story. My teacher, Ajahn Chah, we were out on alms round with our bowls. I was a Buddhist monk walking barefoot to some distant village, and people would give us our morning meal. That was a practice of trust. Some days we had great food. Some days we had very little to eat. Okay. You learn, well, you eat what you get. But anyway, there was a big kind of boulder in the middle of a field we were going by, and he turned to us and he said, is that boulder heavy? We looked back at him like, duh, you know, of course it's heavy. And he smiled, he said, not if you don't pick it up. And so in this next level of mindfulness, you begin to shift from being identified with things. This is me, I have to fix it, I'm bad, I'm good, all of these things, to realize that this is just thoughts. This is just the play of experience. It's not the end of the story. And what grows then is a deep tenderness and compassion for your humanity and the humanity of every because we all have loneliness and longing, just as well. We all have magnificent creativity. We have love and we have fear and hate. We have all of this stuff in us. And instead of taking it so personally, you say, oh, this is what the mind does. It has no pride. I don't know if you've noticed. If you haven't noticed, you haven't started to meditate yet, basically. It doesn't behave the way you tell it to. And you just start to see this is the way things are. And so tenderness and care, oh, this is our human lot. And you come to trust not just that you can be present, but also a very deep kind of renewal begins to happen because you can bear witness to your life with love. And I think of being in teaching with Pema Chodron, wonderful Tibetan nun and friend. And we were doing an evening on compassion in San Francisco for 2,000 or 3,000 people. It was a big event. And we took questions, and toward the end, a young woman stood up whose partner had committed suicide a couple of weeks before. And she was shaking and weeping and obviously still very much in shock. And Pama's first response was just to say, breathe and hold this that you're going through, all the terrible things you're going through, with a great heart of compassion. And the room, you could feel it, this wave of tenderness and compassion. And suicide's very complicated, as you know, because not only is the grief and loss, but also the anger, how could you do this, you know, and the guilt, shouldn't I have done something else, or the shame, or it has all these things. Hold it all. This is part of being human. Sometimes this is what happens. And then I could feel her loneliness. How isolating your suffering can be. So I asked, how many other people in this room have had someone in your family or very close to you commit suicide? And I don't know, 200 or 300 hands went up or people stood up, maybe 8%. And I said, would you please turn your gaze to this young woman? And I said, keep your eyes open to her. I said, this may be hard, but look around. And all these people were gazing at her who had suffered, who'd really been through the same. And all of a sudden the room turned into a great temple. There was such an outpouring without a word of care and love from these people who'd been through what she had, saying, we will carry you too. We're here with you. And so this capacity to shift from content to process brings a kind of humanity to us. This is who we are. Joy and sorrow, praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. Anybody not have that? You have your money back. And so you begin to trust not just that you can be present, but you trust that the renewal of the process. And I remember sitting with someone who had so much rage, this woman who'd been terribly abused. She said, if I let this rage out, it will destroy everything. That's how big it was. And of course I got curious, how big is it? You know, because she was afraid to get near it. How big is it? Like a tornado? She said, oh, bigger. How about a hurricane? Oh, she said, that's nothing. I said, how big? She said, it's nuclear. Okay. I said, all right, close your eyes. Let's just see what happens if you let this rage display itself. So she sat and vibrated and moved and fire and just what had been bottled in her for quite a time. And then she shook her head and she said, it's terrible. I said, what's terrible? She said, it's all dead. I killed everything. It just burned up the universe. I said, what are you experiencing? She said, it's black and dark. Darkness is everywhere and it's all dead. The rage killed everything. I said, well, hang out for a while in the darkness and the deadness. You name it, dead, dead. It's not going to get any deader than that. You might as well experience it. Dead, dead. She said, but it's not changing. I said, well, give it some time. Let's give it 1,000 years. Nothing. Okay, give it 1,000,000 years. It's 2 minutes later. Nothing, just dead. I hate this, I hate myself. Okay, let the hatred fill the deadness. Dead and hateful, okay? Dead, dead, dead. After a little while, she shook her head. I said, what's that? Said, nothing. Okay, dead, dead. Give it 10 million years. We got time, right? Shook her head again. I said, you see something. What is it? Said, well, way over there, there's some light. I said, go toward it. Oh, it's like a little planet, and it's green, and things are starting to sprout again. And there's something so powerful about being able to trust, not only that we can be present for life, but it's in the very nature of your life to renew itself, no matter what you've been through. So, being aware of content of experience, showing up with the spirit of intimacy with life. Letting ourselves see the dance of life, the process of it arising and passing in so many ways. And that's a really humanizing, compassionate, tender thing. My twin brother died. I might talk about it more as we go on, earlier this year. And there was some way in which being with him as a twin, I got closer to death than anything else I've ever experienced. I could feel it in my own body in this very deep way. And there was a way in which, I mean, he died and I didn't, it's true, but nevertheless there was some kind of accompaniment. And in it, I think part of the gift for me was that I practiced enough that I could really stay with him. I don't know if it was a gift for him, I hope so, but it let me hold it in an entirely different way. This is natural. Just as we come into this body, a spirit was born in your body. You know, you're not just made of whatever it is, scrambled eggs and you know, papaya and things like that. I mean, that's a great thing. That's not who you are. You know, or, you know, tofu and burgers or whatever your diet is. That's not your identity. And certainly not your thoughts. I hope not, anyway, given the way thoughts are. And most of them are conditioned anyway. You know, if you look at your thoughts, it's like being stuck in Motel 6 with the chopping channel on and you can't turn it off, you know, or something like that. So who are you? And this is the third dimension, or the third level of mindfulness as it gets deeper. You can be present for the content, you see the process of things, and then the big question is, to whom does it happen? So my teacher Ajahn Chah spent 8 or 10 years in the jungles practicing in caves and with tigers and doing all this very great, kind of strong ascetic practice, and had visions and insights and samadhis. And he went to see the greatest master of his age, another Ajahn, Ajahn Mun, and told him about all these experiences and said, do you have any advice? And the master looked back and said, Cha, you've missed the point. Those are just experiences. They happen, they come and they go. They're like movies, a dramatic movie and a war movie and a romantic comedy, you know, and a documentary. The point isn't to have a particular experience. They're always changing. The point is, to whom do they happen? Turn your attention back to the awareness itself. Become the one who knows. Become the witnessing, the loving awareness that was born into your body and that will be there when you die. You wait and see. And so Ajahn Chah called this the original mind. It's sometimes called the true nature. And one of the simplest ways to have an experience for some people is just to look in the mirror and notice that you've aged, right? It gets a little grayer here, or you lose your fur there, it starts to droop and wrinkle, and it does all that stuff, right? But the weird thing is you don't feel older. You know that experience? And that's because it's only the body that's older. The body exists in time. You know, it's born, it's little, it gets bigger, it cries on the way a bit, right? It gets to a certain point, you're a young adult, and then it starts to get older, and then it dies. It's what it does when things renew themselves on the earth. And you can trust this. But the one who says, getting older, wrinkly, or whatever, is that part doesn't exist in time. Consciousness is timeless, unborn, vast, open. And so here's the next dimension of mindfulness. And I want us to do a practice together for about 10, 12 minutes or so. So let yourself put things down and sit in a comfortable way. Please be comfortable. Does this, you don't have to put yourself in some weird posture. You're weird enough as you are without adding to it, some meditative idea you have. It says in the great texts and instructions, with awareness, with mindfulness itself, to turn and look into the nature of who you are. We talked about it last night when others, like Trudy and others, referenced Ramana Maharshi, who am I? That great question. So this meditation is one way to do this, which works for some folks. And instead of starting with your breath, allow your eyes to close gently. And for this time, keep them closed. And instead, listen to the sounds that appear on the door of the ear. So you sit quietly, and you hear these words appearing and vanishing. And you hear the soft sounds in the room. And the occasional bird song. The distant sounds of the waves or the traffic. And let yourself just listen. And the beautiful thing about listening is that you don't have to do anything with it. Words appear and disappear. The sound of these bells, and as you listen, let yourself sense or feel or imagine any way you can that your mind is not limited to the size of your head. That your mind is as big as this whole tent, this whole room. And even bigger. as vast as the sky. Let yourself imagine or feel, sense that your mind is open like space, timeless, vast. And the sounds that you hear are like clouds or bubbles arising in the vast space of mind. Baby cries and bird songs appear and disappear in the open sky of mind. The sounds of wind and traffic are like weather that appear and move through the space and vanish, leaving no trace. No inside or outside, just a vast space of awareness without boundaries. You are the sky of awareness, consciousness itself. Sounds move through the sky. Notice too how thoughts and images, words and pictures arise in the same vast space. A thought appears, thinks itself for a moment, and then vanishes, leaving no trace. You are the space of loving awareness, vast and open, like the sky, and thoughts and sounds appear and disappear like clouds or bubbles. And notice too how even the breath and body float in this vast sky of awareness. If you feel carefully, there's no solid body. There's a field of vibrations, of warmth and cool, of pressure and heat, sensations of vibration, hard and soft. The body is an ever-changing field of energy. And the breath moves like a breeze, floating in the vast sky of awareness. Relax into it. Trust it. It is your home. Sounds come and go. Thoughts and images arise and pass like clouds or bubbles. Sensations, moods and feelings come and go like weather, floating in the vast space of awareness. In its true nature, mind is timeless, open, allowing for all things yet not limited by them. Rest in loving awareness. Wisdom says you are nothing. Love says you are everything. And know that when you look in the eyes of the people you will see after this meditation, the reminder of this, that you will know they're not just their bodies or thoughts, that there's a spirit behind these eyes, a vastness that weaves through all of life. Trust it. Relax into it. It is your home. When you're ready, let your eyes open again. So one important thing to say at the end of this practice, which you can use as you like, and it's a wonderful practice if there's noise or chaos around, you think, oh, I can't meditate. You're sitting in a cafe and people are speaking and cars going by. You can just let yourself become the sky, become the awareness itself. That both can be present for life and know it and also see its evanescence. And from this you can see one another in a very different way. But what's important is that you not use it to judge yourself. How many people found it helpful that you could feel something of that vastness? It's okay. There are a lot of hands that didn't go up as well. That's because this is only one of 100 different skillful means to open the heart and see clearly. And you don't want to use the meditations to judge yourself. You're already good at that, so you don't want to improve it through your meditation practice. You want to just see this is another way to practice. But underneath it is the invitation to mystery, and the invitation to presence, and an invitation to love. I got this in a hotel room in northern Burma, a little sign that was left on the dresser. It said, "Dear guests, it is our pleasure to provide you with a stamped postcard for sending out to your loved ones around the world. Please leave the postcard at the desk or to receptionist after filling up the address and greetings. We will be glad to mail for you. Note, due to a poor postage system, your postcard may take some time to reach or even may not always reach your address." So it's uncertain, right? It is, it's the way the world is, and it's gloriously uncertain. If you thought you knew, that would be a trouble, and if you really do, it would be worse. But instead, what you get to do is trust that you can be present for this mysterious and glorious life, and this is the beginning of meditation, so thank you.
That was so beautiful, Jack.
Well, thank you. You're beautiful.
I love listening to you teach. But I'm wondering if I could get a glass of water from somebody. I know there's water back there, but I can't reach it from here. And I also want to apologize. I know in some cultures it's very insulting to point your feet at people. So I apologize for pointing my feet in your direction, but I actually revere my feet. So I don't feel that I'm pointing something unworthy or the bottom or to you. I feel so grateful to these feet that carry me everywhere. Even when I have a broken back, I can get a mani-pedi and feel so pampered and happy with these beautiful colored toenails. So apologies for pointing my feet at you. Thank you so much. I've never really taught from this position. Yeah, this is an experiment. Usually you want to be kind of sitting up straight and alert, not like lolling around, but I'm lolling this morning, and there's something good about that, which I'll talk about, because I want to talk about trust as relaxation in the practice, as well as the power of compassion, if I can get there. And I want to first offer a bow to all the teachers and all the cultures that have so generously shared these teachings and practices with us, and the gratitude that I feel for that generosity, that really, of their wisdom that really nourishes all of us, that we're just sharing, transferring to you. And also, I learned from John Lockley, who is here and who will teach with us one day, who is an African shaman trained as a medicine man by the same tribe from which Nelson Mandela comes. John taught me to always, something that we don't do in our culture, which is to always appreciate my own ancestors. Like to invoke my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, this whole lineage of beings who, I'm fortunate, I had nice parents, but most of my suffering came in my adult life, not really generated by them, but no matter what your parents or your lineage were like, no matter how kind or disturbed or impaired or fantastic your family was, there's always some suffering that cascades down the generations. But there's also just that blessing of life, of being alive, that we get to be here because of those folks, no matter what they were like. And that is worthy of our appreciation. And if yours were really so terrible that to invoke them, you know, is cringeworthy, then you can go back to the ones you don't really know. There must have been some really good ones somewhere back there. So I really want to also acknowledge all of something that I think all Indigenous people do, to acknowledge the ancestors and to acknowledge the gratitude and for just being the causes and conditions for this life. And then to ask that whatever happens during our period of study and practice together, that it may be of benefit to you, to me, to all beings everywhere, all those whose lives we touch. And I'll talk some more about that one. But I wanted to talk about trust and relaxation because I think it was, I don't know if it was Ramesh or who told the story about Ram Dass, maybe it was Ram Dass, and patience. I don't know about you, patience is one of my least favorite virtues to cultivate. It's a hard one, and this state of being that I'm in now is really, you have to be patient because bones take weeks and weeks to knit. And then when you're older, they tell you it takes even longer. So this calls for patience. And how do we get patient? I'm not a patient person. And maybe you are, but how do we get to be patient? In the texts, it said, in the Buddhist texts, they talk about which mind states are helpful in our practice and which ones lead to which. And last night Jack told me that patience is considered one that leads to friendliness with experience, to loving kindness. And I didn't exactly see the connection right away. But I think if you think about kids, you know, and how impatient they get, when will we be there? Are we there yet? And having some tenderness or patience with their impatience. So maybe that's one way. But in the texts, it also says that happiness is the proximate cause for being able to concentrate, to focus, to settle, to be still, to do the meditation like the one that Jack led, that beautiful sky, open sky meditation, to be able to enjoy that spaciousness in our hearts and minds. To be able to access that, we need to know how to be present. Jack talked about that right at the beginning, what mindfulness is, that quality of presence. And we take it for granted when we're teaching. We talk about being present. And I remember one day somebody came up to me and I said, what do you guys mean? What does that mean to be actually present with experience? And I think it means to be able to relax and just be here. And how do we get to relax and just be here? We have to feel safe. I think safety is the proximate cause for being able to concentrate, to quiet down, to calm down, to move into a little more stillness where we quiet the busyness of our minds and can be more open and receptive to what's happening. And we'll do a meditation like that. How many of you have heard of mindfulness-based stress reduction or maybe taken a class like that? So I worked with John Kabat-Zinn in the very first years. I think I was the third teacher in that program at UMass Medical Center, in the very first years of that program. And it wasn't called mindfulness-based stress reduction then. It was called the Stress Reduction and Relaxation Program. So people would come with intractable chronic pain. people would come with terminal diagnoses, and people would come with all kinds of anxieties and suffering to our program, because in those early years, nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew about mindfulness in the early 80s in the mainstream culture. And so we would get referrals of the people who were at the end of the medical line. The doctors had nothing else that they could do for them. So they would send them down into the basement to practice with us. And we'd be sitting in a circle with maybe 40 people with these intense life situations and crises, and people from all walks of life, because insurance covered it in those days. So we could have people from all layers of society could come. And there we were, teaching people how to relax into experiences that felt unbearable, that felt terrifying, and how to be able to trust enough in experience, even when it feels awful, to release, to be able to release some of the tensing that happens around it and relax into it. And then we begin to see how things can shift and change. And this kind of trust that allows us to feel safe, and to feel safe enough to then be able to be quiet and still. I mean, think about it. When we feel unsafe and we don't know who's sitting next to us or what they're thinking, when we feel that way, it's very hard to be quiet and calm and present. And our minds are often generating worst case scenarios. Like just in little things, you can see it when you're mindful. You can see it in your everyday life. This morning I was drying my hair, and Jack was sort of standing a ways behind me and looking at me. And I thought, oh God, he's impatient to leave. He thinks I'm going to be late. I don't know why he would think something like that. And so I said, what? What? And he said, I just love to watch you do your hair. I know. And then you see your mind, right? You see that expectation of criticism or judgment or impatience. And something relaxes, because how many things are like that during our day, that we're expecting criticism or judgment or impatience or that which is not of love. And instead, when we can stop and maybe even ask of experience, what? Maybe without that edge of impatience. Just what? What is it? That's actually a huge part of practice in Zen Buddhist tradition, to be able to ask of any experience, what is this? What is it really? Who is it who's having this experience, and what is this experience? When we can really slow into it and feel it in our bodies, and the sensations that are happening, and see this flow of thoughts and feelings arising and forming and dissolving in our stream of consciousness. What is it? It's not any one thing that we can hang on to. So this ability to relax, Jesus said, come to me and you will find rest. I think he was talking about just that, resting our weary minds and hearts, resting from all our fears about what experience might be, or what Jack is thinking about me, or what it might be. Just being able to relax our weary minds. Jack, can you hand me that book, please? And I think Jesus meant to rest in this great openness. This great openness of heart and mind, not just to, fall asleep. Yep, I'm good, thank you. Jack and I have been reading this wonderful book called Barking to the Choir. The subtitle is The Power of Radical Kinship. And Father Greg Boyle, who founded the Homeboy Industries, maybe some of you know his book Tattoos on the Heart. It's a beautiful book of stories from his work with gang members. And the second book is also wonderful. So this is from Father Greg. He says, I was once saying Mass at the San Fernando Juvenile Hall with nearly 300 detained minors, mostly gang members. A homie reads from Psalm 138. I'm seated, vested, eyes closed, choosing to listen to this kid's proclamation rather than follow along in the liturgical sheet that rests on my lap. He reads with an overabundance of confidence. The Lord is exhausted. What? What the hell? I open my eyes and hurriedly refer to my sheet. It says, the Lord is exalted. But I think exhausted is way better. I'm not sure I want to spend eternity with a God who wants to be exalted, who longs to be recognized and made a big deal of. I'd rather hope for a humble God who gets exhausted in delighting over and loving us. That's a better God. And you know, we all have, I think, many of us anyway, at this point in your life and practice, you've gotten exhausted trying different practices and different retreats and different ways and having ideas and judgments about that. The first time I came to this retreat, I couldn't believe it. It's being held in a resort. I am trained in very, I would just say, simple and arduous Zen meditation retreats. You know, you get up at 3 in the morning, you go to bed at 9 at night, then you get up at 3 in the morning, start over again. No rest period, it's very long. Or the Vipassana retreats that we teach, which are silent retreats, completely silent, just sitting, walking. They have such great beauty, and I knew the gifts that those retreats can give to us. And coming to this retreat and seeing everybody talking, just talking and having these scrumptious meals, 3 of them, you know, and swimming in the ocean and soaking in the hot tub, and it just seemed so decadent to me. And I watched my judgment mind over the days, and I felt the love that was being just radiated by Ram Dass and everybody, and saw the power of, what does he say? The power of radical kinship, the power of being able to talk to each other and connect and get to know each other in the retreat and learn something about what it is that brings us here. And by the end, seeing the radiance and the love, those of you who are here for the first time, you'll see, no matter how you feel today and whatever judgments or discomforts or disappointments might be coming up. I know it rained in the middle of Qigong. I don't know if you guys were out there because I couldn't see, but I could see the rain and I saw what time it was. Did it rain on you? And you loved it. It cooled you off. Oh, beautiful. Oh, good. I'm glad. Whatever's happening, you'll see that over these days, imperceptibly, magically, we start to relax. We start to trust that this is good, whatever this is. It's good because it's happening, and we're being asked to make some relationship with everything that's happening in our life. So are we going to make a relationship, you know, that's exalted or exhausted or accepting? Or I loved what Ram Dass said last night about his guru, that he didn't want anything from him. He could feel that unconditional acceptance of just being welcomed as you are. And meditation is very much a come as you are party. How else can we appear except the way we are? So about trust, you have so much trust already. We all know, for example, that when the sun is out, the stars are still there. We can't see them shining the way we can at night, but we don't worry that they're not there. We have this basic trust. One time, a student at Inside LA, this was in our early years, and he was trying to help me make sort of a plan and a timeline for how we were going to grow. We were just growing very organically, and I didn't think that way. So we were working with some poster board, and he was showing me how to make a timeline, and I said, it's okay because I have a trust fund. Now, he was a volunteer, and when I said I had a trust fund, you should have seen his face. It was not sympathetic joy. He looked like he'd been betrayed. Like, here I am helping you for free, and you have a trust fund. And then I said, it's an inner trust fund. And he just relaxed. Phew. I'm not donating my time for nothing. So I want to encourage you while you're here, if there aren't so many clouds, to stargaze. The moon is waxing now, to moon gaze, to rainbow gaze, because we had a beautiful rainbow this morning over all of us. And to sky gaze, and several, did you say? Yes, what is it? You did, you promised us a rainbow, and we got one. He's a good man. He lives, what do you say? His word is very good. You can trust him. To rainbow gaze, to sky gaze, to trust that through opening our gaze. And we can do this any time during the day, just looking up at the sky, cloud gazing, that we can connect with something that is bigger, something that is wiser, that has a huge perspective, a bird's eye view of our lives and our more limited, often, our sense of personal, separate, encapsulated, lonely in our thought world. It's a great way to just open up and connect with our true nature, which is so much bigger than that which we're usually thinking about. So we can connect with this vast consciousness and the wholeness and the unity that Jack was leading us into earlier by stargazing, moon gazing, sky gazing, rainbow gazing. And Jack, I would like to gaze at your watch for a moment. Just, how much time? Only, oh my gosh, okay. Time flies when you're having fun. I want us to do a practice together, a simple meditation of relaxation, and also to say, and I'll talk some more about this tomorrow, that we do, the Tibetan Buddhists, they never do any practice without offering what they call bodhicitta prayers, prayers for the awakening of all beings, that not just for my own awakening, but for the awakening of all beings. And they always ask us to do these prayers before a meditation. And I felt like, yes, I am. I'm supposed to think of all beings, not just my back or my pain. I'm supposed to think of all beings. And I know, because I practice, that I can dedicate whatever practice I do to all beings, but it sort of felt like a should. We're supposed to do this. And then I realized the reason that we're supposed to do this is that it gives our meditation, our prayers, whatever practices we're doing, more power and strength. And the image is like of pouring a glass of water into the ocean. That ocean of positive intention that we're swimming in here in this tent together, that ocean of altruistic, compassionate intention for ourselves and each other in this retreat. And I feel it from you. You don't even need this retreat. I can feel it from you, because even just coming up on the stage with my poles last night, you actually applauded just because I walked up here. That was so compassionate. And I appreciate so much this palpable compassion. So when we join our wishes for each other, for ourselves, for our world, to the wishes of everybody, through our prayers and our intentions when we sit down to practice, it just helps us. Think of it as, those of you who are parents, the things that you've been able to do for a kid, for a baby, the amount of sleep you've been willing to forego, the amount of being tethered, all the things. We can do this as parents. We can do it because that child is, we're offering our patience and our kindness and our effort to something bigger than ourselves. And so we can see how that power is amplified, and our intentions are just made more potent by doing that. So let's do a practice together, a simple practice of trust and relaxation. And before we do this practice, I want to encourage you to just silently, in your own way, to offer what Marshall Rosenberg calls your present location, like the truth and the authenticity of where you are right now. Maybe wondering when there's a break and you can get more chai. Maybe just loving being here, whatever, on the spectrum of where you might be. Making sure that from this present location, we can appreciate where we are. That even if we're in pain or uncomfortable or whatever it might be, heartbroken, disappointed, we can relate to, this is the same experience that anybody who's ever been in pain, who's ever been heartbroken, who's ever been disappointed. This is how it feels to be this way, to be peaceful, to be cool, to be hot, to be relaxed, to be uptight. This is what it's like to be a human being in this condition. And suddenly our personal predicament, our very maybe compressed suffering predicament, joins with all beings who've ever been in this predicament, who've ever been in this state of love or gratitude or whatever it might be. And suddenly we're connected to this much vaster field of experience. So now, as you relax into whatever posture feels good to you right now, just taking a moment to offer the truth of however it is for you right now. Your intention to know this, to be mindful, to hold this truth in loving awareness. That you do this not just for yourself, but for our whole world. That we and all beings may learn to see that whatever this moment is like, we can trust in experience. That whatever it may be, When our hearts are open and our minds are quiet, there's really nothing. As Zen Master Rinzai said, there's nothing that is not sacred. There's nothing that is not profound. So relax your bodies. This is the first foundation of mindfulness. To be with the experience that we're having in this body, hearing sounds, sensing cool breezes, breathing. Just aware of this body as a field of sensation. Taking a deep breath and relaxing. And one more. Meditation is not asking anything of us. It doesn't matter if there's lots of thinking going on. We don't have to worry about that. We just let the thoughts roll by like the waves. And relaxing into experience, we don't abandon ourselves. This is a non-abandoning kind of attention. We're not trying to fix anything or solve anything. Just to relax in not knowing what this next moment may bring. And if you feel yourself getting lost in impatience or having a hard time just being here, just shift your body back. Maybe half an inch, maybe an inch. Just step back into receptivity, receiving the moment, instead of leaning toward the next one. Just sitting back, receptive. Appreciating how it is for you. And trusting in the simplicity of just being here. Right here, in the great now. Our meditation wants nothing from us, but wants everything good for us. we learn to sit up in this posture of dignity and balance. Relaxing in the midst of experience. Just as it is. And by being with ourselves in this way, relaxing and accepting, we strengthen that loving awareness. The tender, infinitely tender nature that is our birthright, to know, to trust, and to wish for all beings everywhere, without exception. Resting our weary minds and hearts with the waves of breath, hearing the bird songs, the children's voices, listening from our heart of hearts. Ding! That's the bell that I couldn't reach. Thank you. That was the power of radical kinship. We help each other. We need each other. So as you go about your day here, as you have your break, I want to encourage you to do a little sky gazing. And to do this, in the Dzogchen tradition, they say short meditations, but many times a day. Like just little quickies all day long. You know, just looking for a few seconds at the sky, at the ocean, at the water. Just opening our hearts for a few seconds a day, all day long. And I thank you for your kindness and look forward to practicing some more together tomorrow and the rest of the day. So thank you, everybody.